So it is just about 1, and we said, you know, we will start on time, and I know people will be trickling in, but there are just wonderful people from South Africa to England to all over the United States who are joining in. And I'm going to turn this is Mark, and I'm going to turn this over to Bernie, who's going to start off, and then he'll throw the baton back to me, and I'll throw it to both of you and Sam. Thanks,
Sounds
Bernie.
fabulous. Happy to be here. We're delighted to welcome all of you to this ongoing conversation with Sam and Mark. Clearly, this is like a family, so there's not a lot of introductions that are necessary. These exchanges between the three of us and occasionally Larry Langer have gone on for a very long time, and it's created a meaningful history for, I think, all of us. We at the gallery have worked together alongside Mark and with Sam for nearly 4 decades. For some of you, that may not seem like a long time. For some of us, it seems like a very long time. On so many levels, their work and human concerns have also been paralleled and shared for almost 40 years. Sam has created visual questions addressing the human condition and our shared responsibility to humankind, while Mark, in Facing History and ourselves, has addressed essentially the same fundamental questions via education and on-site experiences. We've convened this conversation and others on many occasions around Sam's art, as it is at the core of many exchanges and expectations that each of us will ask that you, Sam, and Mark has already indicated, that through either question and answer or chat, your questions so that they can be included. So happy to see that Larry just signed on. Larry is the master of Sam's work for so many years, and very—
Hi, Larry. Hello to a neighbor.
That's it. So we'll be sharing specific works from the new exhibition, Ongoing Conversations. I'll be holding them up. And these are birds in the art of Samuel Bak. These images will allow Mark to ask Sam questions and me from time to time, and we'll be off and talking in a minute. There are a couple of additional notes. If you contact the gallery, you can request an invitation to enter an interpretive contest by submitting your own interpretation of one of these new paintings that is available on the e-catalog if you don't have the printed catalog. And we've extended the deadline from today until the 31st of July. Gary Phillips and I will be reviewing them and then sharing them on the 8th of August with most of you. So here we go. Mark, over to you. A joy, just one brief note to thank you so much for your continuing involvement, concern, and I think love of Sam and his work.
Well, thank you, Bernie. This is a real honor, and it's a perfect title for the gathering, Ongoing Conversations. Bernie, you and Sue have been convening people for meaningful conversations ever since I met you close to 40 years ago, in your gallery and at your home, and now through the mysteries of technology. Your home was a place I gathered with people working for NGOs serving our most vulnerable youth, a site for building bridges throughout Boston. And many years ago, you brought Representative John Lewis to speak with us, a moment I have etched in my memory, and his words and actions and moral clarity will be missed by so many of us. The ongoing conversation between Sam and Facing History, as Bernie said, is also a long history. Over 40 years ago, when the founder of Facing History, Margot Strom, brought Sam's images to 8th grade students who were studying the Holocaust. Since then, thousands of teachers have incorporated Sam's paintings into their classrooms as they explore issues of memory, legacy, and responsibility that we all have to make this a much more just and equitable world. This is my 3rd interview I've had with Sam and Bernie, and the first one included South African freedom fighter Dennis Goldberg, who died in May. Dennis was convicted alongside Nelson Mandela and others in 1964 for resisting apartheid. He spent 22 years in prison. The interaction between Sam and Dennis was magical. And a few years ago, I had the privilege of interviewing Facing History's teacher and truly our mentor for so many decades, Professor Larry Langer, who's on today with Bernie and Sam. The depth of their relationship and insights they shared about the human condition was profound, and I'm honored and humbled to continue our conversation today with Sam's new exhibit about birds. So throughout the next hour, we'll be exploring the symbolism of birds in flight, birds in flight, broken birds, manufactured birds. We'll also explore issues of friendship and Sam's extraordinary insights into connecting the past and the present. Before, I just want to remind you that there's a chat icon and a questions icon. If you have questions for later, towards the end, I'll be collecting some questions that hopefully Stan can reflect on. But in the chat, you're open to continue telling us where you're from, and you might have insights as we go along. So Sam, I'm going to turn this to you. And this is sort of 3 questions that you can sort of incorporate and talk about in you know, however you want. But you've been incorporating birds into your painting since 1960s. Why did you start painting birds, and how has your images of birds changed over time, and why this exhibit now?
Well, it's first of all, let me say hello to all the participants. I'm very moved to know that all this is somehow centered around my own output. I must say is a little intimidating. I remember the first time I came to Boston was for an opening at an exhibition in Bernie's gallery in '71. I came to the United States for the first time in '71. I would have never imagined that only about half a century later, there will be such a thing as a computer, there will be such a thing as a video, there will be such a thing as a Zoom. It will be possible to connect with people. I think the only thing that I'm missing now is the delicious dinner that Bernie usually served on such occasions. But it's okay, it's okay. I also, knowing that Larry Langer is here, I want to say that it now demands from me special courage to speak about my paintings, because I can never do it as well as he does. You know, there is something intimidating speaking about one's own work, because, I mean, works of art are constructed of content and of form. In modern art, very often the form became the content. Since I'm from Vilna, as you know, and from Vilna there is a gene embedded into people not to take things for granted, to ask, to wonder, to ask questions. I mean, even the very religious Jews were kind of reproaching God and accusing him of all kinds of things. There is this thing of questioning. And I belong to a generation of artists who were supposed to put aside subject matter. And yet subject matter became to me very important, because the subject matter is what made me who I am, who gave me the incredible privilege to count among the 5% of Lithuanian Jews who have remained alive, while 95% of them were slaughtered. So for me, painting became something much more than just expressing myself or making a livelihood. It became also a ritual of remembrance. And the remembrance of the bird specifically is related, in my memory, to a very specific image of the courtyard in which I was in the ghetto of Vilna. There were all kinds of rubbish, wooden planks and stuff put aside against the wall, and we children, who were the ones that remained in the ghetto while the parents had to go to various units of slave labor, we built a huge bird on the ground of that courtyard, a huge bird. For us, it was a kind of an aeroplane. And one after the other, we would sit in the middle of this kind of invented bird, and imagine that it is a destroyer, and imagine that the wings of that bird brings us above the ghetto, and we fly out of the ghetto, and we throw bombs on German units, and we were making with our lips the brrr noise, and somehow the bird, with all the various meanings that it has, and of course, metaphorically, different cultures gave the bird different meanings. But for me, basically, that bird was a kind of flying away into freedom. And the bird started to appear in my paintings very early. Already when I moved from kind of semi-abstraction towards figurative paintings, birds were the early birds of announcing my figurative expression.
And how have the birds evolved over time? Because you've been painting birds since the 1960s, and if you look at where they are now, have they evolved? Have they not? And
I really do not know if they have evolved, because I am like there were all kinds of composers that were always asked to play their first sonata, while what they wanted was to play their 20th sonata, and in the program there was their 40th sonata. So I usually paint different subjects at the same time, but exhibit them grouped so that people have a more easy way of entering my paintings. And so this was a very good idea that Bernie had of deciding, since there is already a group existing of certain paintings, maybe you will get inspired by them and do in this vein some more. For me, every painting that I do is like a Russian doll. Every painting contains 10 future paintings, because that painting could have been like this and it could have been like that. And then I say, why not try and see how it is like this or how it is like that? What I am doing is creating a feeling of reality on a flat surface. So already the flat surface is a very physical thing. So since in my paintings there is a kind of a desire of acknowledging the past, and the past through an act of stylistic choice. I'm painting with a style of the 19th century or with a style of the Renaissance, because what I'm trying to say is the past has an incredible presence in the present, and it certainly determines the future. So while as an artist I belong to a generation that tried to get rid of the past, I felt that my generation was throwing out the baby with the baby's the tub water, and I tried to recapture the past, but in a very different context, and speaking also about the making of art. For instance, the very first paintings that you chose for this conversation is a bird that kind of creates itself in our perception, because it is not a bird. Because it are just bits and pieces of wood, planks, and so on, that personally, for me, bring me back to the ghetto, bring me back to the bird that we have created on the ground of the courtyard.
So Sam, I'm going to have Bernie for now hold that up for everyone to see. I think you have to a little higher, Bernie. Yeah, the slides weren't quite working, but I think that you can see the image pretty well. So, so Sam, could you continue? This is called The Artist's Art. And can you reflect a little bit more on the title and also the imagery in the painting that you started with, now that everyone can see it?
Well, I think it's actually a wonderful title. I'm just amazed how good this title is, because, I've painted so many paintings, and to give so many titles is not an easy issue. Because basically my paintings speak again and again and again about the same things. Our concept of perception of what we see around us, trying to find the meaning in the images that we see. And I am trying always to embed in my paintings the existing contradictions of life, which means a painting can mean this, but can also mean something different. And I think what is extremely important is what the beholder of the art brings by himself or by herself to the painting, and makes the choices of seeing this or that.
So Sam, could you wait 1 second? Some of the panelists are saying they cannot see the painting. And I know Bernie was holding it up.
Right.
And so I can see all 4 people on this screen. And when Sam is talking, I'm not sure why you couldn't see Bernie holding that painting.
And hold it again.
Bernie, why don't you talk?
All right, with pleasure. Does this help if I'm speaking and it's up now?
Yeah, you need to speak so that they can see the painting.
All right, I'm happy to speak. I don't know how to speak like a bird, but otherwise I'm happy to do it.
Okay, so people can now see the painting. And so keep it up there for a minute. And then since it's going back and forth for whoever speaks, you can sort of take it down and Sam, you can continue.
Yeah, as you can see, there is in that bird, there is also a certain mechanical element. And I must say that in my earlier childhood, before the ghetto and before the courtyard of the ghetto, birds were also a very important element in my relationship with my grandfather. When I was 5 or 6 years of age, my grandfather had singing birds. So there was this living room that was only devoted to my grandfather's birds. And he would take me and we would enter the living room of their apartment, which had all furniture that was upholstered with such precious material that everything was covered with old bed sheets, so that I would not put any of the jam that I was eating or the chocolate on the furniture. But my grandfather would then open the cages of the birds and he would allow them to fly around. So as you can see already, the birds are in me bringing wonderful memories of my early childhood, of my grandfather, who was then later shot in Ponari in Vilna. And in my abstract things, when birds started to return to my paintings, these birds were representing the Nazis. These were rapacious birds that were trying to catch the whatever they could with their claws. So you see already these contradictions that exist in the bird.
Something just happened. Someone just did something. Where Bernie, your email page is up there. Could you close that out?
There we are. I'm back. Need to be. I was just trying to move this around. Sam, this piece appeared in the first of the books we published on your work in 1986. And when I saw the piece, my response to it was that this was this enlarged for me over a period of years. This was you. It was not only the bird and the construction of the bird that you created with your friends, but it actually was you journeying from place to place to place to place.
Sure. Also, yeah.
When we did this exhibit at Notre Dame, the director of the museum had counted you'd only lived in 18 different places. And so you really were a bird flying from or hopping from one place to another. And then the other part of this is that when your grandfather was an inventor, the notion of your physically inventing on the canvas and replicating that experience certainly rings true. I mean, all these are inventions, but this is a construction invention that you made. And I think it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. This is not in the present catalog. That's why I want to point out the other pieces that we will be discussing are from this ongoing conversation. This is in the early 80s that this painting, or this, it's actually a work on paper, was done. And so the notion that it's even titled The Artist's Art is really quite extraordinary.
So I am going to, we did have technical issues. That's why Bernie is holding up paintings at times while he talks. So what I am going to ask you, I'm going to talk a little bit about this next painting, but framing it. And then Bernie, I would want to turn to you. And as I turn to you, if you could hold up the second painting, but not yet. So
Mark, anybody who has the printed catalog can go to page 8, because that is the painting you're going to be talking about. And then I'm happy to put it up. And also, Emily just allowed people or gave them the contact to print, to get a hold of the e-catalog, and it's on page 8, entitled Unexpected.
So Bernie, you've been a friend of Sam for over 50 years. And over these decades, you've helped so many people open up new ways of understanding his art, as well as be in conversation with Sam about questions about that his paintings provoke. In the letter that you wrote about the whole exhibit, you say, Sam's birds are the closest visual symbol of Sam himself. All layers of meaning assigned to a bird can be applied to Sam the artist, Sam the questioner, Sam the observer, and Sam the advocate, who calls for clear action and deeds to repair our severely shattered world. Giving the prospects along given the protests, alongside the pandemic and our continual destruction of the environment, he calls us to question, to rise up, and to repair. His bird imagery is a unique demand. Each of us must assume responsibility for the world. Well, while I was studying the second painting called Unexpected, I thought about your words. And Bernie, as you hold it up, can you discuss your interpretation of this painting in relationship to the moment that we're living?
Well, I think that there's so much in this particular image, and hopefully many of you can access it in your own catalog. But the notion of the egg itself preceding the chicken, and the egg providing us with the opportunity to fantasize what is going to be unexpected, what comes out of the egg. And you have a variety of eggs that have been pierced, that have been turned into stone, that have been somehow cracked and broken with no chicken, no bird, nothing coming out of it. And then there are others where metallic birds come out, and they are greeted by birds already on the ground. So it's this very—
Hold it up a little more on the screen, yeah.
So at the bottom, can you see right here?
Yeah.
The metal bird coming out, and then the bird on the ground already greeting it. So it is this kind of strange structure that one could think of as, in a bizarre way, a sukkah, misplaced, the arbor that is built during the festival in the fall. But at the same time, it is filled with the potential that eggs represent. How do we anticipate new life being born? And then once it is born, what does it do? At the same time, there are no whole eggs in this piece. Every egg is fractured, cracked, broken in some way, because what they will encounter once they come into life is a broken universe. So now it's up to you, Sam. You painted it. That was just me.
Well, I painted it. That's actually what my job was in all that. I mean, I am, how do you say it in English? It's a rebus. Rebus is an image that contains enigma. And then for the people, it is to solve the enigma. But I'm not painting enigmas of this kind. I mean, the painting does not have one single answer. I mean, the egg, of course, we know the egg is represents life, because that's where life is born. The tree represents a continuation of life. The tree that was cut at a certain point, but yet brings out a stem on its side and so on, is also symbolic in an allegorical sense. So what you have here is a vision of the infinity, of life and destruction and death and repetition. Because, I mean, historians always say history never repeats itself, and yet we know that it very often rhymes in certain ways. It is just enough to think of the federal forces that went to deal with protesters, and think of what happened in Germany in the 30s. So we know that history rhymes. And this rhyming of the history and these eggs that repeat themselves, and the one egg that has been put up on a platform like a monument, but the monument is already broken, has also to do with what is happening today. Hi, Sue. I'm so glad to see that you are sitting there behind her. So here we are. I mean, you said about the painting so many meaningful words that all I can do is I feel a great gratitude that the painting has done its job.
I love it. The other thing is that people should keep in mind that the paintings are painted, and then Sam applies the titles. So
right.
You make a decision when you look at the title whether it's going to help you or it's going to misdirect you. And they're both, because irony is a big part of Sam's worldview. In general, most of us don't get through life and all of its problems without humor and without irony. Otherwise, we become overwhelmed. And certainly we're at a moment in our history now where that could happen over and over again. So I think Sam's paintings now are even more relevant. They are more present, should be more present in our lives and the lives of those around us, to engage and enable and inspire action.
And right. I must add something. All these titles of my paintings were done by me. Right. Because there is a famous artist, a famous surrealist artist, Magritte. I'm sure that many people heard the name Magritte. Magritte used to paint his paintings, and when the paintings were finished, he would invite friends, many of them were poets, writers, and so on, and have them propose titles for the paintings, and then they would vote, and he had the power of veto. And also, here is what titles can do. And his titles are fantastic.
Yeah. I think yours are as well, because and when I use your paintings and deal with them with other people, they provide me with a key. Sometimes the key doesn't work, but
yeah,
it makes me to offer the key to it and then move on from there. Mark?
Yeah, so I'd like to go to the next painting, and the next painting is called A Nest of One's Own.
And it's on page 11 in the catalog if they have it.
Yeah, now, Bernie, why don't you just talk? I think you have to talk for them to see this.
See this? All right, happy to begin anyway. But there's little question, I'm sorry, there is little question that birds do from time to time need nests. They build nests. Many of them go and collect the branches and the twigs and bring them together to create this home for themselves. Sam's bird, however, certainly comes with a variety of things that are not necessarily only branches. The metal wing, the nails, the sides of houses. In a certain sense, it is a continuation of schlepping throughout his entire life, his entire history, and putting each of those elements into his own nest.
So, thank you, Bernie. And Sam, I want to ask you a question about this painting, and then you can respond, and maybe afterwards we can see the painting again, Bernie. This painting just resonated with me, and maybe it's the particular moment. But to me, it was a symbol of home. And you've lived in so many countries. What's the meaning of home to you? And how has this concept of home changed over time? And maybe you can do that while you reflect on the painting.
Well, I don't think that our conversation today has sufficient time for me to say exactly what home means.
Mm-hmm.
Home basically means a place where I feel relatively safe, where the commuting between the bedroom and the place where I work is not more than 10 steps, which is wonderful. Is a place where I can play music very loudly, is a place that can tolerate the smell of turpentine that penetrates all the rooms, is a place which is for me a basis to reach out to friends. And I must say that I was very privileged in my life, very, very privileged that I have lived in many places in the world, although I can say that the first act of my life was, of course, as everybody knows, was quite tragic. But then, since age 12, 13, until now, I had so many extraordinary chances in my life. I lived in various cultures. I discovered various worlds. I mean, all this is today part of myself, and it's part of what I paint. This specific painting that you have here, the home and the bird, is, let me bring you a little footnote to this painting. In order to, when we created with my wife José this home here where I live now since 27 years, the first time in my life that I live in the same place for 27 years happily, and this is really my home. When we created that place, the first thing, in order to feel it safe, we had to put in a burglar alarm. This way that feels safe. And the burglar alarm has a big box outside on the wall of the house where there is a terrible sound that would wake up, I think, half of the suburb where I live. Now, on that box, every year, birds come and create a nest. And every year, we can see the bird and the little birds, and we can see how the parents push them to open their wings and fly. This happened many, many times. And very often I think, if ever that alarm sounded, how would that bird feel? So somehow, I must say, there is hardly a day, because I see this box very often, that I do not think of the poor birds that breed in my house or on top of my house, and the alarm, and this idea of losing the home. Because I have lost the home. I have lost several homes in different circumstances. I have rebuilt homes. I have seen the adaptability of every human being when it is necessary to accept changing conditions is quite extraordinary. So all this kind of salad, which I have just presented to you with my words, is part of what nourishes my painting.
Thank you. And Bernie, you have to talk for a second while you hold it up.
Going back to this, Sam, in addition to all that, the bird and the nest is positioned related to what we think is a tree, but for the most part, the tree is cut off from the ground. It does have branches. It is attractive.
You must bring it up a little, the painting, for the people to see the...
Right. So the base of it, again, doesn't really, it's not rooted.
Well, part of it is cut off, a part of it is rooted, right. Or it might be cut off, or it might be on wheels. We don't know.
Right. But it also, I think, for me at least, responds to the notion of the wandering Jew who schleps with him his roots and replants them and replants them and replants them over and over again. At the same time, what's so wonderful about this particular image is that in spite of all of the transfers from one place to another, there are new leaves. There is a sense of rebirth or growth, going on at the same time that there's an acknowledgement of destruction of the past, and as you just alluded to, sadly, in the present.
So,
Ernie.
Sam, I think, when I think of you and I think of home, I think about not only your house, but the community that you've built over time. And I just want you to know that Nolene and Richard Goldstone are on the call, Rachel Shankman from Memphis, who you've had many interactions with, and many other people from really across the globe. That's part of your community, that's part of your journey, that's part of your home. So over the years, I found it fascinating watching students and adults interact with your paintings. And as you know, everyone focuses on different parts of a painting and they see different things. And I found it really helpful when I look at your paintings to do it with a group of people, because I miss some aspect of the painting, the detail of it, because I'm so caught up in one area. And so we're going to try something and we'll see if it's successful. And I know the technology is now perfect for this, but Bernie's going to hold up a painting. And we're not going to talk about it, but Bernie, you might need to say a few things so the image is on you. And you can't show it that closely. You have to pull it back a little so people can see it.
Okay.
And in the chat box, I just want people not to interpret this painting. And Bernie, over time, you can pull it in and out a little bit so people can see some of the detail. This painting is called Ongoing Conversation. And I think that some of you who've opened up the catalog can see it in there. But what I'd like you to do in your chat box is just describe something that you see in this painting. And since not everyone can see the chat box, I will read out some of the comments before I turn to Bernie and Sam. So Bernie, you need to talk.
It's on page 20 in the printed catalog, or if you have the e-catalog, and that may be better for most of you to have access to it if you have the catalog available. It is, in addition, it is also the title of the exhibition. So, and I would refer people, if they have a chance, to definitely read Jean Cole's essay on ongoing conversation, and also become acquainted with the concept of tzipor hanefesh, which is the Hebrew for the bird of the soul, because it takes Sam, his work, into a very different universe, but nonetheless one that is certainly relevant to the way that his mind works, if that's an understatement.
So this is a hard exercise, actually, because I see some people putting in interpretations already, and it was just to sort of describe what you see. So let me just start to read some of that. Repose and reflection, but chair, the teapot, the Mad Hatter, tea party, Star of David in the roots, bird perched on top of the chair in the teapot in bright light, looking for a pear and smiling, Star of David in the background, teapot, cup, scarf, table, chair, a bird, a teapot, cup. So some of these are repeating with a tree branch going through it. Any other things that you see? Bernie, could you talk and hold it up? Don't interpret it for anyone yet.
Okay, no problem. I'm happy to do that. As you face it, on the left-hand side, there's a suggestion of a pointed roof as part of a house. If you look carefully at the piece there, clearly the fragments of the yellow star are distributed throughout on a number of occasions, and it reminds me of at least a story that I remember Sam saying, that in that he was the artist in the family, he was asked to cut out the yellow triangles, and then his mother sewed the yellow star on their garments.
So let me read some more. The tree goes through the teapot, but the teapot remains intact. Table missing a leg or more. 2 people, Judy and Sarah, both said that. The tablecloth, the tree coming out of a crack in the teapot, new grass, new life growing. The exact representation of what Sam just described at home is what I see, again, in interpretation. I see an ongoing chaotic coffee date. This painting should be up in my restaurant. It would be a good representation of the usual chaos.
This might be my grandson. No?
That's wonderful. We can
Stone mountain behind, a new detail. Anything new that people are seeing in that painting, just as a description of what they see. So the tree may serve as a leg of the table, tree growing out of the table through teapot, dawn or dusk sky or changing weather. Bird is very black. Comment on the chaotic world in the foreground. Phyllis wants you to hold it up again. So Bernie, you have to.
Let me just also point out to you that if you think about the traditional still life from the 16th and 17th century, every item in those still lifes were perfect. The table was flat. You could see the legs of the table. Sam's still lifes, if that's what this is, are just the reverse. It is a still life in chaos. The table itself would never hold these objects. The objects themselves are in disarray. And even the cloth that's on it could be reminiscent of the cloth on an altarpiece. At the same time, it could just be a simple tablecloth or a scarf, as someone mentioned. So there are all these resonances with a world in disarray. So the ongoing conversation here can...
Could you wait 1 second, Bernie? Because you're really leaping into interpretation, which I appreciate, but I want to finish some of the descriptions. So let me just say a couple of descriptions and I'm going to throw it back to you.
No.
So, bird carrying forward the story of the remnants from the destruction of abandoned home. Is there a second bird as a shadow under the chair? A question. Smoke at the horizon, profile on right looking to heaven, wall in the background is floating in the air, and an animal reaching out from within the tree on the right side. So I really leave it to you, Bernie, to continue, and the surface of the table seems uneven. So why don't you continue, and then Sam, I'd love to have you, from all of what people see, to try to pull this together.
Well, I mean, I'm very moved by all these expressions, because it's obvious that the people are really not only looking at the painting, but they are also seeing it. I must say that this painting has, for me, a kind of a personal note in the center of its existence. And it is the teapot. You know, I have painted hundreds of teapots. The teapot for me, the broken teapot for me, is the, I call it, called many paintings, monument for Yiddish land. When I was a child and the war started, I remember all the refugees that were arriving from Warsaw, that were speaking of all kinds of horrors that were starting. And the Jews of Vilna that felt still safe and so on, were saying the others, they're crushing teapots. They hacked a chainik. In Yiddish, to crush up, to break up a teapot means to talk nonsense, means to exaggerate, means not to speak of unbelievable things. So for me, the broken teapot is very much a symbol of nonsense that became real, that became true, which is unfortunately a part of the perception of the beginning of the Shoah. I had my great uncle in Berlin had a visa in 39 for the United States, but he said, all these things that they say, my good German friends will not allow anything to happen to me, because he was a famous poet, he was a famous composer, and so on. He ended up in Auschwitz. So this has for me to do with the broken teapots. Now in this painting, the teapot is in the very center. and the teapot is part of a branch that gives out leaves. So actually this combination is a kind of a symbol of hope. So there is, in this very shattered world, there is something that the Chinik, the teapot, is becoming through the growth whole again. So this was my kind of thought, I think, when I painted this painting. But again, I always ask people, please do not take my observations more than footnotes for the painting, because the painting has to do its job without hearing me speaking about it.
David asked what the title again he needed. It's called Ongoing Conversation, painting in 2019. Bernie, do you want to continue on with this painting? Because I think that there were some of the details I'd love you to sort of flesh out a little bit in your mind.
Well, I mean, Sam certainly is entitled to think he understands his paintings. But I think that the paintings themselves suggest so much more, because each one of us is invited, and that's why we're doing this interpretive contest. We're invited in to extend the conversation and for people to see in the paintings what Sam may not have seen but put in. It's like fantastic poetry. And so it allows that. In this particular case, I see the table, and I do frequently, it's just my problem, of seeing a table on and on again as a symbol of an altar. And again, because of the desecration that has gone on and on and on, this is also a desecrated altar. It will never stand. The legs are not adequate to hold the weight of anything. And that Sam even implies that the teapot itself as a symbol of hope is also a very interesting journey that he has probably taken to come from what he experienced as a child through the DP camps, through Israel, to age 86, and realize that for him, there needs to be both a sense of acknowledgement of the past, the brokenness of the past, and at the same time, some vague hope, especially having his grandson on this with us, is even more important to realize the continuity. That teapot may be used again in Raphael's restaurant.
Mm. So we're going to go to the next painting, and it's called Foreboding.
It's on page
I found this painting haunting. It's sort of the innocence of the egg. This is, to me, my interpretation, in the surrounding sort of dismal landscape. To me, it's a statement that invokes what our children are inheriting and how much in this broken world we need to repair. But Bernie, can you hold?
I'm just going to put it up, and please engage with it. I hope you can see the entire painting. It's just a totally amazing. The small painting, Mark, that you have has the two houses on either side, and here you have these two structures, if you will, framing the metal made-up bird. But people should look at it very, very, very carefully, because it deals with both the sense of foreboding, but also the sense of rebirth. If you see underneath the bird, there is a nest, and in that nest is actually a whole egg. And then there's a small metal bird that has emerged from it. So look carefully, and then there's a large metallic, almost warlike bird in the lower right-hand corner that artistically draws your eye into the entire image. So hopefully people can see it. And then Sarah put up that it's on page 23 of the catalog. So if you can access that, then I think you'll have an even better image of it. Okay, Mark?
That's great. Sam, do you want to build on what Bernie had to say?
Yeah, I must say the painting contains something that I have done in many paintings. It is this sense of being protected, the metal armature that is almost like something from the medieval times, that is at the same time protecting and and yet enslaving and making movement very, very difficult. And I think it has to do with a very important subject in our existence. How much can we protect ourselves without paying for it in a way of losing some of the ability to live? If you want, the big discussion that goes on now in this country, wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, is part of this question. To be armed or not be armed, except being armed, being protected. I mean, I have no answers for these things, but this is the point of the painting. The painting is supposed to provoke the thought.
Sam, Paul Burrs asks, is there any significance that the bird's head is blue?
The bird head?
The bird's head is blue.
A bluebird is a kind of a bird of, I've painted many bluebirds because there is a play of Metterling called the Bluebird, and the bluebird represents more a dream than a real thing. So once the bird is not just a real bird, but it becomes something much more, becomes a symbol, I like to underline it by making it blue.
So I'd go back to this just briefly if you want, and I can pull it up again, because there is, if you look carefully in the Bluebird, the fragments that make up the bird behind it also resonate with a biblical image of the dove that is sent out, and then it acknowledges that the waters have subsided and what appears is a rainbow. So the multicolors represented in the wood slats behind the bird also can resonate with the theme of a rainbow, except this rainbow is totally deconstructed. The rainbow at the end of the Noah story is complete and represents the commitment or covenant that will never be such a disaster again. But here, disaster upon disaster upon disaster has been incurred, and all that remains of the rainbow are the slats of the different colors that used to make up that covenant.
Thanks, Bernie. That's helpful. It's an extraordinary painting. Raphael, I don't know if you saw in the note, Sam, Raphael says, Trojan bird would have been my title proposition.
Tell him tell
Raphael writing from Paris?
No, Raphael is writing from Cape Town.
Cape Town, okay.
That's fabulous. I mean, Mark, the other thing about looking at this when you have a chance is look at the use of the nest and then the runoff of the sort of grasses, if you will, and then the three structures that really dominate, the two large ones in the background, and then the hollowed out shell of a bombed out building. So you have a pretty good sense that the landscape that is around us is about to be destroyed. And if nothing else, this can also reference the climate change, the unwillingness of certain people to recognize that. And this painting appropriately is titled Foreboding. It is a warning.
Yeah. So I'm going to, if that's all right, Bernie, skip the last painting, or maybe at the very end you can show it and people can do. But I don't want to end this without asking a question to both of you. And it's about hope and hopelessness. Years ago, you painted a series of paintings about hope, Sam. And Brian Stevenson, who a lot of you know is an activist and author of Just Mercy, talks about 4 solutions to effect change. One is rewriting, one is getting proximate to people. The second is rewriting the narrative. The third is staying hopeful. And the fourth is a willingness to do things that are uncomfortable and inconvenient. He says, Don't anybody or anything make you hopeless. Hope is the enemy of injustice. After all you have lived through, Sam, and seen and experienced, where do you find hope for our troubled world? Or what gives you hope? Or how do you think about hope?
Oh my goodness, you know, I don't want to become a preacher at age of 86.
When else?
So I, I think that where there is life, there must be hope, and whether because it cannot be otherwise. I mean, we know from some knowledge of psychology and so on that the human being is very often pushed even to total denial of reality in order to keep up hope. And hope is very important, because if we stop believing that there will be tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, and that our children will be able to exist, I mean, all the things that have been said are what I what I believe in. I just do not want to fall into cliches, and I think I have never lost hope. And I must say that, let me tell you, every morning when I open my eyes and I get out of bed, I look at this house and I look at the morning and I look at the green grass and the trees and the sky, and I say, my goodness, what a lucky devil I am. I could have been by now dead since 80 years. And I have had this fantastic gift. So this is my hope, that fantastic gifts will be shared with so many people.
Bernie, any reflections?
Well, I think that the Sam statement for me is an evolved statement. The early pieces of his that we showed that had a very limited color palette and reflected a greater proximity to the horrors that were present in his childhood have now morphed into these absolutely beautiful colors, still dealing with the same questions, the same atrocities, if you will, the same ugliness of one part of the human condition. But in what he just said is also his truth, which is that he has survived all these things. He has continued to create in such a meaningful and important way these visual questions that offer the potential for change. It certainly hasn't worked yet, Sam. I'm waiting for it to happen. But having the project that many of you may know about is a Samuel Bach museum on the campus of the University of Nebraska in Omaha that will house a collection of over 500 pieces and become a study center around exactly these questions of human behavior, of moral choice, of potential, of hope, and all of them recognizing where we're at today, which is a chaotic biblical mess on one level, and on another level, the potential to repair it is still within our ability. So that if there is hope, it is in our ability as human beings to address where we're at now, to make this a fairer and more hopeful world for everyone, not just for a few of us.
Well, thank you for being, both of you, for being so many people's teachers, everyone who's on this, and multiply it by thousands upon thousands. And these images, we have a whole series of Sam's work at Facing History. And whenever I walk into work, which I haven't for the last 4 months, but when I used to, I would just stop and meditate in this incredible series of questions, as you said, about the human condition. And it gave me energy to do the work that we do at Facing History and to try to make some drop in this ocean to make some kind of a difference in the world. So thank you, and this ongoing conversation will continue. And I look forward to when you turn 90 and we'll return again.
Thank you, Mark. You were fabulous.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience. And by the next one on the 8th of August, we hopefully will get the ability to have the images directly on the screen rather than me shaking them at you.
And Jacqueline, thank you for organizing this and pulling us all together. And for everyone on the phone, what a treat to see your names and your words and your interpretations. It was a real treat. So,
and it will be available. It's recorded. So if you want to re-engage with some of these things in a quieter moment, please do it. But thank you, Mark, so much for being present as always.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.